Blackstone Audiobooks presents The Ice Harvest by Scott Phillips. Wichita, Kansas, Christmas Eve, 1979. Part 1. Chapter 1. At 4:15 on a cold, dry Christmas Eve, a nervous middle-aged man in an expensive overcoat walked bareheaded into the Midtown tap room and stood at the near end of the bar with his membership card in hand, waiting for the afternoon barmaid to get off the phone. She was about 40, heavy in a square way, with a shiny face and dishwater blonde hair that looked like she'd got shit-faced and decided to cut it herself. He knew she'd noticed him coming in, but she was taking great pains to pretend she couldn't see him. To do so, she had to stand at a peculiar angle, leaning her hip against the back bar and looking off toward the back door so that she was facing neither the lawyer nor the mirror behind her. The only other drinker at that hour was a small, very slender young man with a fully buttoned jean jacket, who sat leaning with his elbow on the bar, his cheek resting on the heel of his wrist with a cigarette between his index and middle fingers, its ash end burning dangerously close to the tip of his oily pompadour. His eyes were closed and his mouth open. The lawyer unbuttoned his overcoat and stood there for a minute, listening to the barmaid's phone conversation. She had just the start of a drinker's rasp, and if he were hearing her on the phone and not looking at her, he'd have thought it sounded sexy. She seemed to be having some kind of roommate trouble involving a fender bender, a borrowed car, and no insurance, and it didn't look as though she'd be noticing him any time soon. He couldn't remember ever seeing the tap room in daylight before, if the failing gray light filtering through the grime on the front windows qualified as such. It was a deep, narrow old building with a battered pressed-tin ceiling and a long oak bar. On the brick wall behind the bandstand hung a huge black-faced clock with fluorescent purple numbers, and running the length of the opposite wall was a row of red naugahyde booths. All of this was festooned with cheap plastic holly and mistletoe.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?